On this week's episode of Amari Purple Talk, will we get Purple Rain 4K before 4K becomes extinct? Should the estate create a separate label for certain bootleg recordings? Shine the purple spotlight on Vanity and more. Amari Purple Talk starts now. Welcome to episode 20 of Amari Purple Talk, a Prince podcast where I share my thoughts on the purple musical singularity. I'm Richard Cole, your imagination funk soloist, and I want to start by thanking everyone that has tuned in. I hope you're enjoying the show. Please leave your comments on the show where comments are displayed. Please continue to download and listen from your favorite podcast platform. And YouTube listeners, please continue to like and subscribe. Feel free to also visit my website, www.amaricommunications.com. You may also click the links in the show notes to follow me on social media and submit topics or questions for use in future episodes and purchase Amari Purple Talk merchandise. All right, so here we are. This is the first show of 2020. With that out of the way, let's start with our first topic. And our first topic is, will we see a 4K release of Purple Rain, among other things? All right, so as far as this streaming versus physical media, as we're getting kind of deeper into the 21st century and technology is advancing a lot faster than we can keep up sometimes. So, as you know, back in February of last year, it was announced that Samsung will no longer continue to manufacture 4K Blu-ray players. Samsung, kind of the leading manufacturer of Blu-rays and other electronic materials, televisions, etc. So when they stopped making 3D televisions, other manufacturers like Sony, for instance, they also stopped manufacturing 3D televisions. So when the news of them or Samsung no longer manufacturing Blu-ray players, it's probably going to be a matter of time before the other major corporations decide to stop manufacturing them as well. Also, you have the streaming wars, which have begun as well. So you have Netflix, which is still pretty much king of the hill, but they have Disney Plus. You also have Apple TV, HBO. They're fighting for dominance as well. Especially in particular note, Disney Plus. Some of their films that are already on their service come with extras, kind of similar to what you would have on a physical Blu-ray DVD release. So basically, for an example, Avengers Endgame, which is on Disney Plus, has all the deleted scenes, bonus features, and in a way, it has basically rendered my purchase of Avengers Endgame obsolete. So, that being said, now Purple Rain, which is owned by Warner Brothers, and of course, they're in the streaming wars because they own HBO, or HBO Now. So their entire catalog at some point will be available on their streaming service as well, which brings into the question for us Prince supporters out there, the Prince musical purple singularity. Now we do have Purple Rain on Blu-ray, which that's not a bad thing. And in some cases, it can be argued that some releases on Blu-ray are sometimes better than 4K. But that's neither here nor there. But given that now more and more homes are starting to get the ultra high definition, the 4K, It's probably better if you still have a DVD player attached to that and just not dependent on the streaming services, then having a physical media that's compatible with the devices you'll be playing it on would make a lot of sense. So, like I said, again, there is no actual 4K of Purple Rain that's available. And again, why this is a question, because musically speaking, you have CDs and vinyl. Now, vinyl, for the first time in almost or over 30 years, is starting to outpace the sale of CDs. But that being said, CDs are still available. Most of us purchased the 1999 Super Deluxe. We've purchased originals. We've been purchasing the reissues of the Prince albums that Sony has the license to release with permission of the estate. So the music business is a little bit different. Yeah, people tend to stream, or I should say streaming is probably the most common. But for a lot of music aficionados, having a physical CD or vinyl or both is the preferred collector's method. And that's because the way we hear things on vinyl or the way we hear things on CD versus MP3 versus the FLAC files that are common amongst the streaming services, we tend to hear things differently. So there's subtle nuances, mastering choices that tend to differ amongst music aficionados. Movies, on the other hand, are a totally different thing. And kind of going back to the beginnings of home media in regards to movies. When home video started, you had the Betamax and you had VHS. So it was kind of a competition between the two. Now, the difference, if a lot of you remember VHS, that ended up being the preferred choice. And that only because the manufacturers of VHS were better at marketing and convinced a lot of us that that was the better medium. Now, were easier to store. Betamax, on the other hand, was a lot larger. And it was based on the fact that back in the golden age of television, the videotape that was used, it was about inch and a half thick, I believe. So what you would see broadcast into your homes in the 60s, the 70s, into the 80s, kind of prior to the digital age, that was the preferred method of tape. So basically, regardless of what television set you had, and there weren't many choices, but as televisions, like first it was only black and white, then there were color televisions, and then as the screens were getting larger and larger, then the picture quality from that 1.5 inch, 2-inch tape or whatever size it was gave you a clearer picture. So all of that to say that beta was the better medium, but the marketing for VHS totally outstripped it and left Betamax in the dust. Along with VHS, you also had the Laserdisc. And basically it was just about a 12-inch album size disc. So it was basically a large giant DVD. And it kind of played like an album. So you would put it in the Laserdisc player. You would play maybe half of the movie on one side. Then you had to flip it over. And then you would get the second half of the movie from the other side. So anyway, so this is sort of the evolution of home media. So we went from that to the VHS. Laserdisc did try to come back for a brief period, but the DVD became sort of the industry standard with that. And like I said, movie aficionados are quite similar to music aficionados as far as preferred physical media, especially since the age of the DVD. And especially now, standard DVD versus Blu-ray versus 4K. With Blu-ray, the amount of bonus features you would get per disc. Now, some people only just want the movie, and that's fine. And it got to a point as Blu-ray started to become more commonplace, then your standard DVD regulated itself to probably just the movie and maybe a deleted scene or two, while the selling point of the Blu-ray took over from the special edition standard DVD, where the standard DVD you got the disc with the film, some commentary, and then maybe the second DVD would have all the documentaries, the deleted scenes, and special features and stuff. So the Blu-ray took over from that in order to become a better selling point for Blu-ray and to aim itself at the serious movie collector. So now we're in the age of 4K, ultra high def. Some people still enjoy 3D television. I'm not a 3D person. There's very few movies that I've seen in the theater that I actually enjoyed in 3D. Very, very few. I just prefer to view it in its standard 2 definition presentation. But back to Purple Rain. Like I said, I have the Blu-ray of it, and picture quality is nice. To me, it's better than the standard DVD. Actually, I had both. It was the actual 20th anniversary release, which was the original standard DVD that came out in 2004. And eventually got around to just getting the Blu-ray version of it. But to me, that's my preferred medium, would be the Blu-ray of Purple Rain. There's also Blu-rays that are available for Under the Cherry Moon and Graffiti Bridge as well. And overseas, there is a Blu-ray version of Sign of the Times as well. For me to get that, I would need a region-free DVD player. And for those that are unfamiliar, different countries have different coding for their visual mediums. Even back with VHS, you had to, if you were living in England, you needed a certain type of VHS player. You probably wouldn't be able to play it on an American bought VHS player. Same thing for DVD players, Blu-ray players, 4K players, etc. So in order to, say, if you bought a movie from Japan or France or Germany, or in the case of, like I said, Sign of the Times, Germany, then you would need a DVD player that's called region free, that allows you to play DVDs regardless of what country you buy them in. And the appeal of that is that there are movies, whether they were made native to that country, and you're a fan of, say, German cinema or French cinema or, Japanese cinema. There's a lot of anime that you can only get there. And again, using Sign of the Times as an example, films you can only get there. Or rare American-made films that the American industry isn't interested in manufacturing or selling, feeling that they won't make enough money off of it. So, it might be only available in a certain country. So all of that to say, if Warner Brothers, since they're competing in the streaming wars, will probably have their best films transferred to the 4K medium. And of course, Purple Rain, which as of the latter part of last year, was nominated for inclusion for preservation in the National Archive. So it would make sense at some point to have that available in 4K, even if it's only as available as a digital release. Like I said, because Samsung, they've already discontinued their manufacturing of Blu-ray players. And it's probably be another year or so before the rest of the industry follows suit. And we're coming up on 2024. It's only 4 more years away, which would make that the 40th anniversary of Purple Rain. So if by that time access to 4K physical media, if that's going to be limited or wiped out altogether, as far as definitely new releases, but even archived releases, what will happen? Will it just be only available on digital? Who knows? But like I said, in regards to not only Purple Rain, but films like Under the Cherry Moon and Graffiti Bridge. Now, great, they weren't bestsellers. They didn't quite set the box office world on fire. But I could see where they can do a limited release, limited 4K release. And what will happen to any future releases? There's a multitude of live recordings out there. There's other films that Prince has in his vault. Of course, you can clean those up, and like I said, they would probably be better served on, whatever streaming service the estate deems, worthy of having those presented in. But as far as a physical release, what will happen? I don't think that physical media is going to just go away. Again, vinyl never really went away. It's just that CDs, and of course now the age of streaming and MP3s, pushed it so far to the back that there just became less manufacturing plants and just was not as widely available as CDs. In other words, your big market stores just stopped carrying vinyl for a long, long time. But vinyl has come back, and it's come back in a big way. Cassettes have come back also. So, as far as music collectors, it's not going to go away. Physical media will always be there, and there are enough aficionados of all ages that embrace CDs, that embrace vinyl. But as far as the movie fans, like I said, a lot of people love their physical media. I enjoy it. And it also brings to the question, if you go totally digital, now everything's great. You have a lot of choices for viewing your movies nowadays, from Disney Plus to Netflix, Amazon Prime, but a lot of those are held to the standard of what we call licensing. And just like in the case of Prince's music, where the classic albums, Warner Brothers has that license for another year, movies are held to that same standard. There are Marvel movies that are still licensed to Netflix for a certain time, and then when that license expires, then they'll leave Netflix and go to Disney Plus. Now, if you're only a fan of Netflix, but you love the Marvel films, a couple of those are actually going to go away and end up on Disney Plus. But since a lot of licensing deals were made prior to the inception of Disney Plus, so you'll have something like, say, Black Panther, I forget the exact date, but it will leave Netflix and go to Disney Plus. It's either later this year or sometime next year. I can't remember. But it will move from Netflix to Disney Plus up until 2026. And then it will go back to Netflix for whatever specified time that was agreed. And then probably from there, its permanent home will be back to Disney Plus. So the downside is that if you're only a fan of one or a couple of particular mediums, or streaming services, I should say, and then that service loses the license to your favorite film or whatever. Same thing with some of the streaming services. I notice now I'm a Tidal person. I do have Apple Music, but I don't subscribe to it. And I also am on Spotify. But on Spotify and Tidal, there are certain albums by certain artists that just aren't on those platforms. Off the top of my head, there's one Whispers album in particular. There's a Shalimar album or two that aren't available. Now, of course, as far as Shalimar, the classic albums are there with the classic lineup. But a couple of the ones after that, which weren't bad. I mean, I enjoy listening to them from time to time. Not as much as the classic stuff, but there were good songs on a couple of those that just aren't available on Tidal or on Spotify. Now, I can go on to Apple Music and purchase it if I wanted to. Now, I do have the vinyl, so I'm good there. So if I do want to hear it, then I can just break out the vinyl and listen to it. So that being said, with the digital, you don't really have a permanent home for your collection. It could disappear at the drop of a hat. Or, if a big EMP wipes everything out on the planet, electronics wise, then, it's over. But on the flip side, you can't just take a big case of your 25 CDs or your 25 movies. You can't take them anywhere. So if you're going on a trip, you don't have it. But at least with the digital medium, then you could just pop open your phone or pop open your tablet or Kindle, iPad, whatever, and you have your entire collection right there at your disposal. So you don't have to worry about lugging an extra case, visiting friends or family, or just taking a vacation and you just want to relax on the beach somewhere. So there are pros and cons to it. But again, like I said, I would love to see an actual 4K release of Purple Rain. And especially, like I said, getting nearer to the 40th anniversary of it. I would like to see that expanded in a way with extras. I mean, the Blu-ray and the original 20th anniversary edition, they're both the same. All the same special features on both are great. I mean, that was really great, especially for 2004. That was really nice to have all of those. But, I would like to see even more for the 40th if, they choose that particular time to do a big 4K release, and hopefully physical media will survive to warrant that. But again, if it ends up where you have to buy it on Amazon Prime or something, digital, or Apple TV and purchase it that way or something, then, that'll be nice too. But I don't know. But what do you think? Do you want a 4K release of Purple Rain? Are you also a movie collector as well as a music collector, and just as particular about your movie collecting as you are about vinyl or CDs? Leave me a comment and let me know. And with that, we're going to end this topic and we're going to move on to topic number 2. And topic number 2 is, should the estate create an outlet for certain vault recordings? All right, so listeners of this program know my fondness for the Experience Hendrix LLC, which is the Jimi Hendrix Estates company. Jimi Hendrix's sister runs that company and has curated and oversaw and authorized every Jimi Hendrix release since they regained ownership of it in the late 90s. And they have done some amazing things since 1996. They did have a licensing deal with which is now Universal Music Group. It was MCA back in the late 90s. But since the about 2009, they made a licensing deal with Sony. So basically, Sony is the home of all the official Jimi Hendrix releases. They have the licensing, but Jimi Hendrix still controls the masters. So even way back in the MPG Music Club days, my call sign was Funkicidal. Even back then, even while Prince was still with us, walking the earth, I always championed that as the best example of how to handle your past, your classic catalog, as well as your unreleased material as well. Now, granted, during the MPG Music Club, what Prince was doing, that was superb. And believe me, that version of the MPG Music Club is still to this day sorely missed. So, I'm hoping one day that the estate can kind of come up with something that would be the equivalent of excellence to the Experience Hendrix organization. But what the Hendrix estate has, and I'll have a link in the show notes to where you can check it out. In addition to the official Jimi Hendrix website, within that, they have a subsidiary that is called Dagger Records. And basically, what it is it's an outlet created by the Hendrix estate. Again, because you have the official albums, the 3 classic albums that Jimmy released within his lifetime, 4 if you count Band of Gypsies as well. So 4 official albums that were released during his lifetime. And since his death in 1970, but especially since the family has been running things since 1996, there have been a lot of officially released live recordings, professionally done, remastered. Eddie Kramer, who was Jimi Hendrix's recording engineer from day one, practically, continues to help oversee and go through all the recordings, and they go through and pick out the best ones, and they've done compilations, live recordings, a lot of great stuff there. But there's also a wealth of material that's, I would say, not so professionally recorded, but it's stuff that the fans still, well, I'll put it this way, there's still a demand for it. And what the Hendrix estate has done with this Dagger Records subsidiary is provide those recordings. Now, they're recordings that you can only clean them up so much. There may have been things that was, that maybe Jimmy had in his possession. There may have been something that certain fans had, and I guess they made a deal, or kind of similar in scope to Frank Zappa's Beat the Boots releases, where these recordings were circulating amongst collectors in the community, but the Hendrix estate is taking those and making them officially available at a reasonable price to meet the demand of their fan base. So that brings the question, is that something that the estate should consider doing? Now, again, like I said, the estate does not, as far as I know, they don't listen to this program. They don't know who I am. I'm just a guy just doing a podcast for the Purple Singularity here. So, but this was an idea that I would think would be a great idea for the estate to try to do, meet that demand. And like I said, I know even with some of the stuff that's been released officially, there has been some contention among some fans about, oh, this was just taken from a cassette. And granted, if you read a lot of interviews with Michael Howe, who is overseeing the vault and making sure the material is archived properly and curating a lot of these releases that we've been getting, some of these tracks is only just that version. And in the case of Prince, it's only because certain songs, the master tape, he may have taken out of the vault and overdubbed it for the project at hand. So meaning that the original mix of a certain song no longer exists. It only exists on that cassette tape now. And granted, for me, it hasn't been a problem. I mean, in some cases, it doesn't make a difference. I enjoy it. I love listening to it. But I understand the fans that kind of have that, more of a critical ear in that regard. And again, like I said, Prince's case, it's a little different. I mean, both Prince and Hendrix were very prolific. Prince probably more so. And, also given the fact that Prince lived past the age of 27 as well. So he was able to accumulate more and more and more. And kind of like Stevie Wonder, go into the vault, cherry pick a song and, kind of update it or overdub some things to update it. And then that becomes the definitive version of that particular track. But there's also, there's a lot of live recordings that are in circulation. There's a lot of sort of demos that are in circulation to where, like I said, no matter what you do, you won't be able to improve the quality on. But there's still a demand. Now, it won't be on the level of a mainstream demand, to which, things like the 1999 Super Deluxe originals, yeah, that meets our needs as hardcore fans. However, there is an appeal that can bring on board someone within the mainstream that just may be vaguely familiar or just getting into collecting. And I think something like a subsidiary for the kind of more hardcore material, the kind of deeper dive material, would be a great idea. Now, whether you do that as physical releases, now with the Dagger Records stuff, those are available on physical media. I've just kind of glanced at the site. Most of it's CD, I believe. Yeah, most of it's on CD. I know there's a couple of things that were... okay, yeah, there is some vinyl. So you can get a lot of these recordings. Well, I'm sorry. There looks like about maybe 2 or 3 that you can get both on CD and on vinyl. But the majority of these recordings are available on CD. Like I said, there's a link I'll post up for this site. If you want to take a look at it, and maybe that'll inspire you. If anybody out there has the ear of the estate or the ear of, say, Sony, they can talk to the estate or something. This is something they can look into as an idea. I mean, they may even put this as a suggestion. Maybe this is something they might be working on, but it won't get revealed to us for quite some time until they're actually ready to drop something. But I think this would be a great idea, especially for a lot of recordings. Some of this stuff I mentioned in my Bite the Boot segment. Like I said, I'm not sure how, a lot of stuff is on soundboard and can be mixed or remixed or remastered. But I'm sure there's a lot of legendary recordings that are circulating that where, the only thing is a fan with maybe not, it won't be a guy with just like a little Panasonic cassette back then, but, maybe somebody with maybe not so great mix board, but maybe managed to sneak a reel-to-reel in or something and get something that would be a nice little something for just the hardcore fans to have in their collection. So that way we can, as this stuff is being released, yes, the rest of the world will get to hear and experience what we've experienced, but then over here there'll still be this sort of deep dive stuff, but it will be sold to us officially by the estate and at a reasonable price as well. So, but what do you guys think? Do you think that would be a good idea to do just a separate label, just for kind of the more deeper dive, less professionally recorded stuff that's circulating? Or should it be just mixed in with some of the stuff that's officially been released like now? Leave a comment and let me know. And with that, we are going to end topic number 2 and move right along to topic 3. And topic 3 is replace the gold experience with a new compilation. All right, so every once in a while, the topic of the gold experience pops up. I've done segments on it. You can go back to previous episodes. Primarily, the big one is, will we ever see the gold experience again? And for people that are new to this program or that are new to the world of Prince and maybe not know what's going on, as you know, Sony has the license to every Prince album from 1995 up until his passing in 2016. But one popular album in particular amongst a lot of Prince fans is the Gold Experience. And this was I'm calling it the centerpiece of his fight to regain ownership of his masters during the period where he changed his name from Prince to an unpronounceable symbol. There's a whole history of that. You can research it. You can also go on YouTube and look up the Amari Purple Talk Emancipation Special. So I kind of touch on that history a little bit in that video. So if you want to check that out as well. But the Gold Experience, it was probably one of his strongest albums of the 90s. The controversy comes with this song, The Most Beautiful Girl in the World, which was originally released as a single, wasn't intended to be on the album at first, but like I said, this album became sort of the centerpiece, and it also became sort of leverage in his battle with Warner Brothers. So the compromise became, okay, well, Warner Brothers will release this album, but you're going to have to put The Most Beautiful Girl in the World on it. So he did. Now, this song in particular, there is a lawsuit that's still ongoing, and it's going on in Italian court. And based on my research, lawsuits tend to go on forever and a day and several more minutes after that. Or in Prince language, it's a year long and plays for months. But there's a couple of Italian songwriters that have been suing Prince. It's been 10, 20 years now, I think. And because of this lawsuit, then the estate no longer, and probably because they're also playing hardball too, because there was a judgment at one point saying that royalties still have to be paid to these particular songwriters. Now, to me, this lawsuit is a bunch of bullshit, really. Because it's Prince we're talking about. We know how prolific he is. And granted, when you, as an artist, when you submit a song to a record company, one of the harsh realities is that the song that you wrote, you may hear it by somebody else. And of course, it'll, a few notes here and there will change. The lyrics have definitely changed, but you'll still recognize it as yours. But the harsh reality is there's few people that can sue and do win. Don't get me wrong. But more often than not, it falls to the argument that there's only so many notes. So there's bound to be at some point, since the day music began, there's bound to be some repetition. And the thing that has to be proven is, did this person consciously steal absolutely just about everything from your composition in that? So again, like I said, this whole thing, it's ridiculous to me. So, but here we are in 2020, and a whole album is being withheld because of one song. Now, you've also heard me say on this song, for those that have been listening from the beginning, but for the newbies out there, for those of you that have purchased the Versace experience, basically what that was in the 90s, as kind of a way to promote your album, you would put out these things they were called samplers back then. I think now they're mixtapes. I don't know what they call them now, but basically it's just an album long commercial of your album. Basically. And they used to originally just only come in cassette. And this particular cassette was passed around during the height of this battle with Warner Brothers, during a Versace show during Fashion Week around 1995, just prior to the Gold Experience's release. And it says it in everything you need is right there in the title, the Versace Experience Prelude to Gold. So everything's right there that you need to know. So this was reissued originally on Record Store Day, April 13th of 2019. And then in September of 2019, a CD version was released along with Chaos and Disorder and Emancipation. So my overall feeling, now, like I said, as a collector, it's a nice piece to have, the Versace Experience CD. It's something very nice to have in your collection. But I really honestly feel that Sony, along with the estate, since they could not release the Gold Experience, because I feel if they could have, this would have been part of that trio of releases. It seems that with each trio of releases, they kind of follow loosely a chronological order. Like at the beginning of last year, we got 3121, Musicology, and Planet Earth. So those three were, Musicology, 3121, then Planet Earth were released in that order originally. So when they did the reissue, they took those three. So it seemed like the next set logically would have been the Gold Experience, Chaos and Disorder, and Emancipation. But instead we got this Versace Experience, which again, it's a nice buffer. To me, it's a nice little collector's piece. But passing it off as an actual album just doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So since the Gold Experience can't be released, and there's a lot of great material. I mean, even critics at that time, even though they were dismissing Prince with the whole symbol name change, a lot of people thought he was going crazy. He wasn't as commercially viable as he was during the 80s. But that was because of this, because neither Warner Brothers were going out of their way to promote the albums. And with the exception of the Gold Experience, Prince wasn't going out of his way to promote whatever he was releasing on Warner Brothers. So that being said, there's a lot of great material on that album. That period itself, in fact, it's one of my favorite eras of Prince. It's right after the classic period for me. There's the classic period, of course, where, I was a teenager in my early 20s. That whole 80s experience, definitely. But at number 2 is that sort of 94, 95 period. That lineup of the NPG, a lot of the shows that I've managed to collect, that was a pretty funky ensemble. And I love the Gold Experience. And I also liked a lot of the songs. I mean, like Come as an album, I enjoyed the songs, or a lot of the songs a lot, but it is an album, as an overall album experience, it leaves me a little bit flat, even though I enjoy a number of the cuts from it. But the Gold Experience was a nice, enjoyable album from beginning to end. And it was a very cohesive album. And it's an album that deserves to see the light of day. And, whoever, is doing this lawsuit, granted now that the estate is aligned with Sony, get some of those Sony lawyers to, put the hammer down and, make this thing go away so we can get it. But with that being said, if it's going to take a significant amount of time to release the Gold Experience, then I would just replace it. And I would replace it with a compilation album, a full album. Not the Versace Experience, but a full album taking a lot of the songs from the Gold Experience. Now, keep in mind, originally, The Most Beautiful Girl in the World was not supposed to be part of that album. So you can slip in a lot of different songs as a replacement for that. I would even go so far as to, because I think Sony also has control of the Come album, I would, and granted there's a lot of fans of that album, and that's fine, but not necessarily eliminate that per se. I would kind of just reissue it just the way the other albums have been reissued. That way it falls back into the hands of fans of that album that, either missed out on it or lost it or needs to replace it for whatever reason. But, or better yet, still release that. But what I would do is substitute The Most Beautiful Girl in the World. I mean, you can put the original version of Come on this compilation. You can put the studio version of Days of Wild on it as originally intended. But like I said, because we're not really trying to recreate the Gold Experience with this, but to create a a proper, what I'm calling a proper buffer for that album. And, for those that follow on Facebook, sometimes I put the in-show, what I call the in-show graphics, up as a promotion a little bit after the show is aired, and kind of, just kind of as a refresher or reminder for people that haven't had time to catch up on previous episodes or even the current episodes. But there's a particular in-show graphic that'll be posted on Facebook. So if you follow a lot of the Facebook groups, or if you follow my artist page on Facebook, then I'll have that up for you so you can see it. But it's sort of a little mock-up cover that I made, and I just loosely called it the artist experience. Now I do have a track listing. I think I'll post that up later this week too. Just kind of like my basic idea of the songs. And my inspiration for that came from that letter that Maite, and I put in quotations, wrote. I read it in an issue of Controversy magazine. That was the big fan magazine back in the 90s. And it was kind of loosely explaining the name change and what Prince was working on at the time. And what was so fascinating about it was that all the titles she listed all had one-word titles. There was Race, there was Papa, there was Come, there was Space, there was Pope. And it was like, you're reading this letter, and when you get to that part of that letter, you're like, man, what is this going to sound like? Because it's like, there's the name change, which baffled all of us, like, what's going on with this, and why is this happening? And then you kind of getting, and I just like, oh, okay, well, maybe, you're thinking this is going someplace really, really cool. And in some ways it did, but there's some things that kind of got lost in translation too, and where the whole thing became more of a joke than it did about what we know now. What if we knew then what we know now, I don't know, we would have, he probably would have been able to get out of there a lot sooner. But just to read that was like, man, what's Come going to sound like? What's Papa going to sound like? What's Pope going to sound like? This one word titles, there's a theme, there's a cohesion there. So, again, just kind of taking a lot of those songs from that era, and maybe even a few that we don't know about. Maybe there's some songs in there that we've never even heard before, even going through the collector's circuit. But make a single CD compilation, just a single CD. You don't need a super deluxe edition. I mean, if you want to include a DVD and bundle it with that, kind of what triggered this topic, because I've covered it in previous topics before, but the I Hate You video was a video that I had never seen from beginning to end. I've seen a snippet of it somewhere, and I can't really remember where, but watching that video from beginning to end, and let's see, I'm trying to think what the other video from that era was I was looking at. Shoot, I can't remember, but that just reminded me just how great of an era that was, and how great the songs were for that period, and how those songs need to be, they need to be heard. And it's sad that one song is preventing that from happening. So again, like I said, just replace it with a serious, a good compilation album. And I think Sony's is due for that. I don't know what all the legal entanglements are, because like I said, I know a lot of the classic era stuff is still tied up with Warner Brothers until 2021. But it would be nice if, Sony could put out something, this year, at least, maybe kind of hold off on an Originals 2 or something. I mean, come on, let Warner Brothers swing for the fences. Just let them just back off and swing for the fences, whether they want to do a Sign of the Times box or Super Deluxe or Parade Super Deluxe or an Around the World in a Day Super Deluxe. But just kind of leave some room for Sony just to put out a serious compilation that, like I said, we know it's a buffer, but I think this would be a better quality buffer and something that would work better. And especially if you do the liner notes correctly, putting that era in context and putting the importance of the Gold Experience in context with the liner notes, and have these songs available for people to hear. I don't know. I just think we deserve better than the Versace Experience. Again, not hating on it. Like I said, I do enjoy it. There's some things I do enjoy on it. But as a consumer, speaking as a consumer, I just felt that was sort of a quick, cheap way to try to replace a classic, or what should be a classic album, or one of his later classic albums, because we know what's going on. We know you can't release it, but and to kind of, it would be kind of a letdown if you still put it out and just left that track off, or if you just snuck in another track or whatever. But I think a compilation would be a good way to sort of say face with that, because you have the songs that are on the Gold Experience plus a few extras, and then give some good detailed liner notes, just putting that whole thing in its proper context, and at the same time whetting that appetite for the Gold Experience, so when it finally does come out, you can go big. You can do a super deluxe of that, and here's some more vault tracks. And believe me, a lot of concerts from that era are slamming, so you could do you can bundle that with a good video, you can bundle that with a good live CD, and you've got that excitement built up because you got this compilation that puts everything into its proper context. So that's my opinion. I think definitely, until further notice, I really think that the Gold Experience should be replaced. But what do you think? Do you think that an official compilation would be a better buffer than the Versace Experience? Do you think that the Versace Experience was enough and is doing what I just said, that it's whetting the appetite for the Gold Experience? Leave me a comment and let me know. And with that, we are going to end that's our final topic, and we're going to move right along to our new segment, which is the Purple Spotlight. And basically, it's a segment that highlights a Prince album, film, or video, or an associated artist. And today's Purple Spotlight is Vanity. All right. So, Vanity was born Denise Katrina Matthews. She was born on January 4th, 1959. And she passed away on February 15th of 2016. And of course, we all know Vanity from Vanity 6. She was born on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. She appeared in a couple of little small B movies prior to meeting Prince. Of course, the legend has it that she was with Rick James at the American Music Awards. This was around 81 or so, and met Prince there at the awards. And of course, over time they got together, and to a lot of the fan community, she was the girl. A lot of similarities personality wise. I think they kind of influenced each other a lot. Definitely comes out in a lot of the songs from that period. The Probably the most telling one is definitely The Beautiful Ones. A lot of people tried to claim that as they were the inspiration, but no, it was, according to Prince, it was definitely Vanity that was the inspiration on that. So, but hey, I was a fan. Shoot, I kind of remember when Nasty Girl first came out. The radio would play it, and they say, "Well, this is Vanity 6," and I'm thinking like, wow, and I think shortly after hearing it, then word started getting around that this, was sort of the part of the Prince circle. Like a lot of us, believe that Jamie Starr was a separate person still at that particular time. That was kind of the beginnings anyway. Before later on we started to find out what the real deal was about that. But, I remember when I first started hearing that song and they were like, this is Vanity 6, and then word started getting around that this was part of Prince's circle. I was like, man, because this song was just as funky as anything that the time was doing, and this was right around the same time that 777 9311 had just come out as a single. The What Time Is It album was just starting to get released, and then here comes, as far as I remember it, I mean, it could be different, and like I said, I probably just came in later, but yeah, but hearing that song, I thought like, wow, he got a second band. Because, I grew up with, the whole Parliament Funkadelic thing where you had, George Clinton, there was Parliament over on Warner Brothers. Funkadelic that was on Warner Brothers. Then you had Parliament that was on Casablanca. Then you had Bootsy, but it was, George Clinton was sort of the center of it all. So I was thinking that, okay, Prince is following this template. He got this Jamie Starr person, and now there's The Time, and now there's this Vanity 6, and I thought that this was a self-contained band that in this particular case just had a girl singer or two in it. It's like, man, so it's 6 of them. So it's like, who's playing drums? Well, who's on the bass? Because that's funky. Or okay, well, she's the lead singer, but as we found out that it was a girl group and they were just called Vanity 6. So, but I mean, I bought the record and I mean, I loved it because I mean, like I said, I was also a new wave person too. I like the Cars and I like the Police and those cuts as well. And like I said, definitely knee deep into the funk as well. And I remember, when I got that album, it came with like a little small fold out poster. And, that poster stayed on my wall through the duration from all through the rest of high school, early college years. And in fact, I managed to hold on to it for a while, but just kind of during storage, it just didn't hold up well, so there's no sense in keeping it any longer. But trust me, that I'm surprised it wasn't taken down. Because my grandmother, she threw away my Eddie Murphy Comedian album. I bought that twice, and both of those copies, quote unquote, disappeared. Now, when it came to Prince, to keep Prince from disappearing, like, I would play something like Let's Pretend We're Married, and then, it would get to the part of, ooh, I wanna, and then the volume goes down. And then it would come back up. And then, or I let that part play because it's like, okay, they won't hear, she won't hear that. And then turn it back up at the part it goes, can you relate? So Prince got spared from, the infamous vanishing of that. And like I said, I'm surprised the poster didn't vanish, but thank God that poster didn't vanish, because I even had at one point an even larger Vanity 6 poster. I had one large Vanity 6 poster, one large Time poster, and all other posters, were smaller in comparison. Yeah, so I mean, I definitely bought into the whole, the image, all 3 of them, Vanity, Susan, Brenda, the whole group itself. I mean, it was a great concept. I mean, I liked a lot of the tracks on that album, for sure. But as we also know, that when it came time to film Purple Rain, she wanted more money. And since she wasn't getting any more money, then she backed out of the project and went totally solo. And to be honest, I just never really got fully into the solo work, except I would say with the exception of Mechanical Emotion, the duet with Morris Day on her first solo album. Because pretty much it was like, I don't know, some people enjoyed that song. For me, I just felt it could have been better. I mean, there's a, and you kind of take that risk. I mean, unless you're Jesse Johnson or Morris Day or Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, or Andre Simone or St. Paul or Wendy and Lisa, it's like you can go on and you can kind of forge your own stamp and still command a sort of respect. Where, Vanity, no, she wasn't a musician. And, and looking at that first solo album was produced by a guy named, Bill Wolfer. I first heard that name on the Jacksons Live album. He's one of the stage musicians for the Jacksons for that tour. And then I didn't hear his name pop up again until Shalimar's You Can Count on Me, which is a really beautiful ballad. And kind of one of my favorite Shalimar tracks. But to me, where I kind of started losing respect for this cat, there's a Shalimar song called Dancing in the Sheets, which is a blatant ripoff of 1999. I think the only thing I really dig about that particular song, it kind of goes to the middle eight, where it kind of goes to, grab your coat and wave goodbye to your friends. I like that bit. That bit's original. And then kind of Mickey Free's guitar playing on that track. I enjoy that. But everything else is a blatant ripoff of 1999. So, this guy is the sole producer of Vanity's first solo album. And again, it's got that sort of cheesy 80s. What made the 80s cheesy? Those kind of generic synthetic sounds that, they haven't aged well. It's probably halfway cool for then. And we bought into it for then. But then now you kind of go back and go, man, get this out of it. Yeah, I don't want to hear that right now. So, there's nobody raised the bar with that. But like I said, I did enjoy Mechanical Emotion. I did enjoy that track. And then there was the second solo album, which had Under the Influence, which I enjoyed that track. I really felt that should have been a lot bigger than what it did kind of go like it was a hit. It was on the charts, like kind of in the top 10. But it kind of probably stayed there for like a week or a few weeks or whatever, and then just kind of died out after that. And only the deep dive fans really remember this cut. But that was a pretty good track. And kind of as I was kind of reacquainting myself with her work, because, granted, now what she was able to do with in some of the films, she did pretty good. I know there was one point she was tapped to be in Martin Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ, but then there ended up being a scheduling issue, and she ended up missing out on that role. But I think if she was able to gain the experience of working with Scorsese, I think she would have been able to kind of go to another level. But, there were things like The Last Dragon, which was pretty good. I enjoyed her in that. Action Jackson, I enjoyed her in that also. And I think there was one movie I think she was in. It was, I don't know how big or small the part was. And I can't remember the actors in it, but there was 52 Pickup, and that was kind of a serious film. But yeah, she didn't really, I would say, she didn't translate, or she translated a little bit better in films. For the brief time that she was in film, she's done had done some television. But I think what kind of kept her from really getting to that next level was, of course, the drug use, and also too, she did after it took such a toll, and of course, it nearly ended her life a lot sooner than what it did. But that experience led her into becoming an evangelist. So she literally turned her back on the whole Vanity Six thing. She turned her back on a lot of the, roles that she became known for. And there was a valid attempt to try to play other parts that didn't require, the sort of the bombshell, sex symbol type of thing. So there was that. There was one tidbit. There was an assistant that mentioned that, like, when she went full on religion, that she was throwing stuff out, and he was trying to salvage some of it. This assistant was, and among one of those items was a hand drawn cassette that had a lot of unreleased Prince songs on it. So, I wonder what's on that tape, folks. But but getting back to Vanity's music, the other thing that I enjoyed too, and again, like I said, I don't know what the things going on behind the scenes may have been, but with that Action Jackson film, she did have 3 songs on that soundtrack. 2 of them were produced by Jesse Johnson, and that was Faraway Eyes and Undress Me. And I enjoy Jesse Johnson as a producer as well as a solo artist. So those 2 particular tracks were really good. Like I said, kind of diving back into it, it was like, oh yeah, that was quintessential Jesse Johnson. And then Faraway Eyes, there's 1 or 2 ballads that it's kind of like you get Jesse Johnson as somebody that can write ballads, but you mostly associate him with the funk or just the heavy guitar. But this track, Faraway Eyes, it was co-written with him and Sue Ann Carwell, which is another, somebody we'll probably have to do a purple spotlight on at some point. But the deep dive fans know who I'm talking about. But those are 2 great songs. And really, to be honest, those should have been pushed more, especially the ballad. Because, we're talking like 88. So I think she could have gotten away with Undress Me a little bit. I think that still would have been a big hit had it gotten the push, if it was like if she had a good label behind her. But to me, Faraway Eyes would have just been the quintessential ballad, or one of the quintessential ballads for 1988. But then again, these were songs that were dumped on the soundtrack. This was an action movie. Carl Weathers was holding his own, basically. It's like, yeah, there was Sylvester Stallone, there was Arnold, but really, Carl Weathers competed very well, with this film, to me. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I remember seeing it in the theater. So, I enjoyed that film quite a bit, and seen it a few times on home video. And I may have to seek it out now. But, her music career kind of ended with that. Just those songs on the soundtrack album. But again, up until she kind of had the health crisis in the early 90s, up until that point, she was still pursuing the acting. And like I said, as she became born again, started taking less provocative roles, and really, I guess, wanting to be known more for her acting chops. So definitely, I mean, this was an enjoyable one to kind of dive back into, because it was like, I mean, I knew, like I said, the Vanity 6 album, favorite from that period. Like I said, I didn't really go out and seek out a lot of the solo material, but, I do remember hearing a lot of things on the radio. I remember the Under the Influence video. I remembered that. But kind of going back in, there was an appearance on Dick Clark, American Bandstand. She performed Under the Influence, and there's this song called Animal, which was the second single off of that second solo album. But which was kind of like, Let's Go Crazy 3.5, or, kind of like Let's Go Crazy meets Horny Toad or something. And I think that song was just really, because this was around 86. So I think the song was about 3 years too late. I think had that, if she left the Prince camp in 83 and immediately released that song, then I think that would have been a bigger hit. Because, I mean, it was good watching the performance on Bandstand. So she did pretty well. And that was a song I'd never really heard, but I enjoyed it a lot. Now, her solo albums are out of print. And as far as we know, Vanity 6 officially is out of print as well. So hopefully, at least with the Vanity 6 album, hopefully the estate will release that one day. But as far as her studio albums, I guess you can only find them maybe just on vinyl. I'll probably have to look myself. I don't know. Maybe I'll add them to my collection. Like I said, I didn't really get into it too much, with the exception of a few songs here and there. But like I said, just the research, and she's no longer with us. So it's kind of like, let me revisit this. And, like I said, it was good to revisit it. Very good to revisit it. But her solo albums, Wild Animal, that was released in 1984. And that was the album that had the singles Pretty Mess and Mechanical Emotion, which was the duet with Morris Day. And then there was Skin on Skin, which was released in 1986, and that had Under the Influence and Animal as its singles. Also, too, I guess if you can find the Action Jackson soundtrack, like I said, there were various artists on that one, but of course, if you want to do an even deeper dive of the music of Vanity, then definitely seek that one out as well. I would probably recommend finding that first, and then revisit Skin on Skin, and then to me, just visit Wild Animal for the duet with Morris Day for me. So Vanity, and of course I know since you gave up that name in the early 90s, Denise Matthews, happy belated birthday. Thank you for all the music. Thank you for your movies. Let's have a moment of silence for Denise Katrina Matthews. Denise Matthews, thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to our final segment of the week, and that is our Bite the Boots segment. Bite the Boots is a segment that highlights a circulating bootleg or vault recording or video for consideration for an official release by the estate. And today's Bite the Boot selection is Nude Tour 1990, the La Coruna, Spain performance from July 29th, 1990. All right, so the Nude Tour was in between Batman and Graffiti Bridge. So it took place throughout spring, summer of 1990. So it wasn't tied to a particular album. He did premiere The Question of You, which ended up on Graffiti Bridge. That was previewed during that tour. As far as recent songs, Bat Dance and Party Man were part of the set list. Everything else was pretty much just a greatest hits tour. And the other thing significant about this particular tour was that the Sign of the Times Love Sexy lineup was no more. It was a brand new lineup, which saw the debut of Michael Bland on drums, Rosie Gaines on keyboards, and the dancers at that time known as the Game Boys, which was Tony Mosley, Tony M, Kirk Johnson, or Kirky J at that time, and let's see, Damon. Why am I drawing a blank on Damon's name? Stand by, folks. All right, Damon Dixon. All right, so those were the additions to what we now know, or will soon to be known as the new power generation. And this tour did not tour the United States at all. It was mainly Europe and Japan. There were, let's see, if I'm not mistaken, there were 3 performances from that tour that were professionally filmed for their for respective television broadcast in those countries. I believe there were 2 that were in Spain, to which this particular performance was one of them. Probably the most popular would be the performance in Japan, in Tokyo. All 3 of those are very popular amongst the collector circuit, but to me, I see the Tokyo video pop up the most often. I know it's one that I definitely have, but it seems to get around, or it has gotten a lot more traction than the other 2. But recently, this one from La Coruna has been circulating as well. And I finally got a chance to view it. And to me, I guess the reason is that the Tokyo one seems to be better. I don't even know how to put it. Better photographed, probably. Maybe better videoed. Not sure. But the energy from the Spain performance, though, to me is more, I would say, infectious. It seems a lot higher. The energy level seems a lot higher. Not that there's anything wrong with the Tokyo one. That one is good. And like I said, I own that one and enjoy it every single time that I watch it. But there's something just slightly different about the one in Spain. And it could be a difference in audience. Sometimes Japanese audience, even though they're very enthusiastic, and I know, like, you see documentaries on the Beatles when they talk about that, where, the audience, they're a little bit more subdued, where everywhere else you got the screaming fans and, the energy level's really high. In Japan, for a long time, it may be a little bit different now, but for a long time, it was like, yeah, they were into you, there was no doubt about that. But, it would be more like a respectful kind of a thing instead of, the massive screaming. It's like, kind of on that level. So, so that might be the reason for the subtle differences. But I would like to see this get equal time. I don't know how you would package it per se, because like I said, there was no album that you could tie it to. You couldn't bundle it with Batman per se. You couldn't do a super deluxe version of Batman and stick that on there. It just would be out of place. You couldn't really stick it onto Graffiti Bridge because, there's just the question of you. It's not like maybe it would be different if there were, 3, 4, or 5 more songs from Graffiti Bridge that would have been on the set list. But again, it's something that it would definitely have to get its own single DVD release, or you could do like I don't know which one you would put out, but let's just say for argument's sake, since we're talking about the one in Spain, if you did the one in Spain as the official DVD release, would you do the Tokyo, or take some of the Tokyo performances and use those as bonus features, I guess? Or maybe even a documentary of the tour or something as a bonus feature. Not quite certain, but definitely this one, like I said, deserves equal time along with the Tokyo performance. If not, like I said, if you just had to do one or the other, like I said, the energy level was high enough on that one. Oh, I will say maybe the other subtle difference too, because you're all talking about song rights, because there's segments they cover, a couple of blues songs. They also cover Aretha Franklin's Respect on that tour. But on the Tokyo one, you get, during the Party Man performance, you kind of get that little section in the middle where they cover What Have You Done For Me Lately. So if it becomes a thing of, if you have to pay out too much for the publishing for all the covers on it, then I would say definitely go for, the Spain concert as the official release on that. But like I said, the energy level is definitely, it's high enough to where if you clean up the video and, sort of clean up the sound a bit and prepare it for today's, electronic outlets, or for your streaming services, this is definitely one that I would highly recommend the estate consider releasing, even just slightly more so than the Tokyo one on that. But what do you think? Like I said, I think there's only been 3 of those shows that were professionally filmed for television broadcast in their respective countries. So is there a particular one that you prefer? Do you prefer the Tokyo one over this one? Is there another one from Spain that you would prefer better? Or is there footage from another concert that we don't know about? But what do you think? Leave a comment below. And that is going to end this episode of Amari Purple Talk, the first Amari Purple Talk for 2020. So hope everybody had a good time. Like I said, still working on the Amari Funk Soloist Hour. Look for that sometime in February. Like I said, still working out the different show notes and the topics and things of that nature, but looking at debuting that around February. So I'll keep you posted on an official release date for that. Also, too, there is official Amari Purple Talk merchandise. T-shirts and coffee mugs. Just there's a link to the merchandising. Everything's manufactured and distributed by Cafe Press. So get on there, see something you like, and there's also other stuff too, in addition to Amari Purple Talk material. So go, by all means, check it out. If you see something you like, definitely pick it up. And that's going to end this week's episode. Peace and love to everyone in Australia. Try to stay safe. Yeah, I know it's very, very heavy down there. So, like I said, by all means, try to stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And let's try to leave this planet a little bit better than how we found it. And as always, keep it purple and on the one.